Hey, what's up? Welcome back. It has been a minute. I kind of slightly fell off the face of the earth for a little bit, so my bad. And this video was one that I wanted to make for a while and was supposed to make a few months back, but I wasn't able to. And being that I wasn't, I was able to spend a lot more time working on this video and kind of getting a better insight as to this pad. Sorry, Wayco. I know it's taken way too long for this to come out. My bad, again. Anyways, I feel like that kind of extra time I got to spend with it gives me a little bit of a better idea as to where I personally felt the pad struggled at times and what made it really nice for me and the way that I play games. So, without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. This is the Wayco Island P87 V2. This pad was sent out to me by Wayco Island for review, but that does not in any way affect my opinion on it. So I wanted to start by going over some of the specs of the pad and then going into how I spent my time using this pad. Before I do get into that though, you will notice I have this camera up here and I also will have this other angle that I'll be cutting back to, just so I have like a kind of closer, tighter angle that you can see. This is a new camera that I got. I don't even know if I'm pointing at it. This is a new camera that I got, so hopefully it looks good. If not, that's gonna suck. If it doesn't look good, you won't even know because I'm only going to be using the footage from this one. So for starters, the pad comes in at 490 by 490 millimeters by 3.5 millimeters width. If you guys have seen any of my videos in the past, you'll probably know that the pad size I think is the most ideal is 500 by 500. So already given it a pass there. I won't, knock them a point on 10 millimeters. As for the width, I also want to mention just right out the get-go that this is the V2 version of the P87, not the V3. The newer batches, the V3 versions, are a little bit thicker with a surface that's closer to the V1 version. I don't have one of the V3s on hand. I only have the V2 on hand, so everything in this video is just going to be about the V2 version. The surface is a jacquard type weave with pretty smooth and consistent glide. The feel on hand is super soft, and I'll try to throw some images on screen of like close-ups of the weave for people that are interested in that kind of thing. Yeah, super consistent glide on the pad. I haven't really seen any issues just in day-to-day use. Really no issues. Feels great. On the surface is also the actual design of the pad, which is this like 5-color gradient, but not really a gradient. It's more like colors just stacked on top of each other, going from like yellow down to purple, or like I guess like a light pastelish purple. And then in the top right and bottom left corner we have this little like plain design, which I'll also have a better shot of, and then the actual Wayco logo down here in the bottom left corner. One thing that is nice obviously about the design is that the logo and the little design up here are actually weaved into the pad, which with logos and designs of this size, obviously you're going to want them be weaved into the pad and not like kind of that like plastic that goes over the top of the surface, or else you're losing like 10% of the entire max amount of the pad that you can use. Then you're just kind of confined to this motion. The edges are super thin, though they're a little bit rough to the touch, but definitely not rough enough to cause any like abrasion on your wrists or arms while playing. I never really noticed them, but like when going specifically over them and trying to make a note of them with my fingers, you can kind of feel some roughness to them. The edges also sit slightly below the surface, which is always nice. I always appreciate that. I like below surface stitched edges. For the base, we have a standard polyurethane, which I've had no issues with. The pad sticks to the desk. I haven't noticed anything like slipping or anything like that, even if I try to push on it. I would say the actual firmness of the pad reminds me of something closer to like an artisan soft, maybe a little bit firmer than a soft. I don't have a soft on hand right now, but that's what I remember it feeling the closest to. It's definitely not plush like an X soft, but it's soft enough to where if you push your mouse, like if you really bear down on your mouse, then you can get that little extra boost of control. So now we'll go into kind of the actual feel of the pad itself. I'll say for starters that the pad is marketed as a mud pad for games like CSGO, specifically CSGO, per Wayco themselves, but I imagine it would be the same kind of usability in something like Valorant or other TAC FPS games where you use a lot of control. But even though the pad is marketed as more of a control pad or a mud pad, to me, it genuinely feels closer to something like a hybrid pad, or leaning into, I guess, like the hybrid control territory. Currently, I'm using the Viper V3 with Ghost Glide side clones, which are a relatively fast skate. And I'll say when I switch them to something like I had thrown these on, these are Jade donuts that I threw on the Atlantis Mini just the other day. So these are very new, not really worn in skates. It's definitely slower. I have to put a lot more force on it to make it spin in this. If I try to do the exact same force between the two, this is the Cyclones and the Jade Donuts, trying to give it like 50% of force, and then versus something like the Cyclone skates. So it seems like the feel can be a little bit more dependent on skate. If you have a very controlled skate, like full-size skates, you'll probably feel a lot more control than I do on this pad. Me personally, the Cyclones are my main skate that I use on basically every single mouse, and so it feels super fast, at least in terms of a control pad. Some of the benefits I think it has for how you actually like use it in games and like aiming itself is I feel like it has really good stopping power and just overall control, which I notice a lot more. If you're kind of tensing up and you're bearing down a little bit more, you'll start to notice a little bit more control. And then also, if you're using a lot less tension, it keeps a really smooth, consistent glide just over both the X and Y and Z and ABC axes. I feel like where I saw the most benefit was any game where I did a lot of like target switching, like Battlefield or Delta Force or COD or something like that. Anywhere where you're doing a lot of target switching, I feel like performed really well, because I feel like you can use, how smooth the glide is, even though it's such a slow pad, and then also, get that extra added control when, making micro corrections or trying to snap onto somebody. As for weaknesses of this pad, honestly, it was really hard for me to find things that I didn't like about it. If I were to nitpick, there was only like 2 things that I could really come up with. And that's, the first one is that if you're looking for a very slow or controlled surface, then this might not be exactly what you're expecting when it's being marketed as a mud pad. I don't know what the marketing is going to look like when it actually comes out, but as of how it is right now, it's marketed as a mud pad that also is just super smooth, which I feel like kind of just puts it more into the hybrid category. But that really comes down to the actual firmness of the pad, and isn't really a slight at this pad more so. The only real complaint, the only real thing that I had any issue with on the pad at all is that the feeling might vary from person to person, but I noticed the pad does not feel super moisture resistant. So if I'm like nervous or something in a game and my hands start to sweat, I'll have like semi-dead spots where a lot of that glide just kind of goes out the window and I start to feel the mud in the word mud pad, or the phrase mud pad. And both of those complaints are really more specific to myself and how I play. But outside of that, I really have no other issues. I think I sat using this pad for like 2 to 3 months straight, and it still feels as amazing as like the first day. So who should actually look into buying a pad like this? On paper, it's built for games like Counter-Strike or Valorant, but I honestly think it peaks in stuff like Battlefield, Delta Force, or COD, or any game where you're doing a little bit of tracking and a little bit of clicking, I think is where the pad hits perfectly. You can use it 100% in TAC FPS and tracking games alike, but if you're someone like me who's super into target switching, then I think this is an amazing pad to pick up. If you're like like the last Quake Live player who all you do is lightning gun duels, then maybe not this one. Maybe sit this one out. I don't know. But anyways, I think that's all of my opinion on the pad so far. I'm going to keep using it. If I do have any other opinions, follow me on Twitter. I'll probably make some more notes about it there. But that's all I have for today. If you did like this review, thanks.